Welcome to the We Rise podcast, where we are building collective resilience. I'm your host, Christine Gyovai, business owner, wife, mother of two, paddleboarder, and I love working with communities across the nation. Join me as I share stories and strategies to inspire action to build resilience and community transformation. From the Navajo Nation to the mountains of Appalachia, incredible work is being done by community members and leaders. I'm excited to share more on the podcast today. Welcome. Welcome all to this We Rise podcast episode on building resilient networks and sustaining long-term collaboratives. We are so glad you're here. We're going to do a deep dive in this episode into what resilience means, the cycles that networks move through, different roles in collaboratives, models or ways forward for networks at different crossroad moments, best practices, and case studies. And please note that we use the term networks and collaboratives interchangeably in this discussion. The way that a group chooses to grow into a more resilient network will need to be grounded in the context, community, and culture of each specific collaborative, each with their own equity and sustainability considerations, and it will look different in different places. While the overall pattern or template that we use in our work at Dialogue and Design Associates with collaboratives is similar to the one we've been using with groups for over 15 years, there are key moments in time when the pattern needs to shift due to changes in leadership, funding, or other critical factors. That's what we're going to look at today. How do you do that over the long term in a big group? How a collaborative can grow with and through those times as a key part of their long-term resilience and sustainability. We are also actively learning and growing as practitioners with our firm Dialogue and Design, and these ideas are evolving. We'd love to hear your ideas, experience, and feedback. Reach out to us on the contact page of the website, yeswerise.org, or share your ideas on social media. The resources, links, and references for this episode can also be found on the episode webpage. To create change, people need to feel like they belong and they are part of a growing movement. They need to know that their voice matters and that they have the inspiration, agency, and ability to transform their communities. Change is often sparked by inspiration, seeing what others have done, especially in peer communities. People see that when someone looks like them or lives in a place like theirs, and they have created real, true, and lasting change that will allow their granddaughters and grandsons to thrive, they begin to imagine what it might be possible in their own communities. No longer waiting for someone else to come and save them, they realize they are the ones they've been waiting for. But what creates that spark and what creates that inspiration? Learning through stories and examples, feeling a sense of agency and belonging, and getting fired up to kick ass creates that spark. Change-making work is often called being resilient, but what does resilience actually mean? At a core level, it means the capacity to recover from difficulties or tough times. But it also includes creating a stronger, brighter future for generations to come, and that's the part that's often not looked at. It takes many shapes and it comes in different sizes. Resilience includes building community, a healthier environment, and robust local economies. It also means growing equity, inclusion, and belonging, prioritizing care of self and others, and creating regeneration at all levels. There are many kinds of resilience. Individual resilience, which looks at a person's ability to recover quickly or withstand difficult conditions, or social resilience, which recognizes the importance of collective efforts. It also includes ecological resilience. For example, how does a place bounce back after a significant storm or fire? Or economic resilience, which explores how a community or region moves through an economic downturn or a shock, and how it rebounds or even bounces forward to a stronger future. What is learned in that struggle, in that growth, that is the key to resilience, especially for networks. We have a foundational belief in our work that resilience is built on the local ideas of local leaders. They are the key to a resilient future. Networks create that space for people to come together and for a place to bounce forward together collaboratively. The work is often messy, and it takes a long time for relationships and trust to be built. And the results of the collective work, though, are often far more effective than groups working on their own. We'll share stories in this episode of networks that are considering how to grow their resilience and others that have transformed over time, best practices, as well as tools that can be put into place. But first, here's a story about a collaborative near and dear to my heart. You may have heard about Curvy in a previous episode. I met Mayor Deborah Horn, featured in episode 9 of the podcast in my work of almost a decade with the Clinch River Valley Initiative, also known as CURVY, working to build local economies in Southwest Virginia around outdoor recreation. CURVY focuses specifically on the Clinch River, one of the most biodiverse rivers in the world. The Clinch River Valley Initiative was created after Building Local Economies in Southwest Virginia in 2010, which I co-facilitated until 2018 with my colleague and mentor Frank Dukes at the Institute for Engagement and Negotiation at the University of Virginia. We held the first meeting at UVA's College at Wise after deeply listening to dozens and dozens of amazing community members talk about their visions, dreams, hopes, and challenges for their communities. People told us they wanted a place to talk about the future of their communities that wasn't for or against something, not pro-coal or anti-coal. They just wanted to dream together. With the input of many local leaders, we hosted the meeting to envision what the economic future of Southwest Virginia would look like. Many people came to that first meeting that knew each other, but didn't often work together, and many others didn't know each other at all, including environmental activists, economic development directors, academics, and grandmothers. The meeting focused on downtown revitalization, artisan networks, and outdoor recreation, all economic drivers. We heard many great ideas that day, but the discussions that drew the most excitement were around outdoor recreation, specifically on the Clinch River. The Clinch has been a favorite spot for locals, researchers, anglers, and recreationists. Named a global hotspot for biodiversity by the Nature Conservancy, the Clinch flows for 300 miles from its headwaters in Tazewell County southwest through the forested mountains and small towns to the Tennessee River, where it continues to the Ohio River and then the mighty Mississippi. Free-flowing and undammed in Virginia, the Clinch hosts some of the most diverse and imperiled aquatic wildlife in the nation, including more than 50 species of mussels, more than any other river in the world. Many in Southwest Virginia have fished in the Clinch for generations, learned to swim and have been baptized in its waters, and have a deep love for it and the place they call home. After that first meeting at UVA Wise, several people got excited about the possibility to connect outdoor recreation and local economic development through focusing on the Clinch, noting it was a local asset that could not be outsourced or moved to another location. As CURVY grew, community members created a vision, several goals with active action teams, and a steering committee with decisions being made by consensus about the effort. An annual Clinch River Youth Summit and educational programs were created, several access points were installed for kayak and canoe launches, regional marketing and branding campaigns took shape, and new businesses started to develop over the years. Town leaders and community members began to talk with each other and learn about each other's efforts across town and county lines. Many were happy to share possible grant sources, ways to support entrepreneurs to start and sustain local businesses, and were eager to share their histories as part of CURVY and the broader region. People referred to the river towns, many of which were new to the regional collaborative, as pearls along the Clinch. A long-held dream by many was finally realized in connecting these pearls and creating a Clinch River State Park in 2018 in St. Paul in Southwest Virginia, with several additional parcels comprising the park still in the works to create a blueway along the Clinch, supporting both recreation and local economic development. In co-facilitating CURVY with Frank, we developed a document which can be found on the episode webpage called How CURVY Works as a resource for other collaboratives, since we were often asked what were some of the key elements of CURVY's success. Looking at how CURVY evolved is also an interesting part of the story. Funding for facilitation ran out in 2018, and it became harder and harder to acquire new grant funding for the initiative as it got older and was no longer considered new. At the same time, though, the work was still expanding and deepening. The steering committee decided to form as a nonprofit organization after a strategic planning period and explored several options, including how to develop long-term funding sources. As the group was applying for its 501c3 nonprofit status and was working on cultivating new funding options, the COVID-19 pandemic began, and progress slowed down like it did for many, many networks. The group, however, continued to meet online as a steering committee, but other challenges popped up. The website was hacked at one point, the domain expired after it changed hands, the newsletter stopped going out to a broader list, and larger meetings were less frequent. However, the group was able to receive nonprofit status and found a funder who guaranteed 3 years of support for an executive director who came on board in 2022. CURVY has now entered a new phase of growth with strong local partners, and this engaged regional collaborative has a bright future ahead. So when we look at resilience in networks as a whole, there are several repeating themes that come up. Many of the long-term, large-scale collaboratives we work with at some point need to consider a strategy for their continued growth or evolution. As leaders, needs, and funding inevitably change, networks consider how they can continue to adapt and plan for changes in cultures in the communities they're grounded in for long-term resilience. When these groups proactively plan, they're in a much better position for the long haul. Authors Shoemate and Cooper wrote in an excellent fall 2022 article called How to Build More Resilient Networks. Many of the more than 50 networks we studied underwent what we call a crossroads moment. These moments were not just common challenges like retiring members or the development of a new initiative. And not all of them were related to widespread turmoil such as COVID-19, but they all posed do-or-die problems for the networks we studied. How can social impact networks survive and even thrive through these crossroad moments? Our research suggests that almost all networks face them, and the prior decisions they make influence their options and, by extension, their outcomes. Networks that prove to be resilient embrace practices that prepare them for the questions that all networks will have to face when these moments arrive. And just as a side, these 3 questions that they pose, these 3 areas of consideration, I think are just absolutely essential. First, they decentralize their leadership. Second, they identify and align their theory of change with resources. And third, they develop strategies to manage conflict effectively. And the authors continue. When these crossroad moments arrive, effective network leaders tell the truth and guide their organizational members through a set of fundamental questions and ways that resolve them. It's an excellent article, and we'll include the link in the show notes. The authors define what social impact networks are in the article, identify 5 theories of change that most networks will embrace, 5 common crossroad moments that networks face as well, and the work that they need to do to prepare to become more resilient. They also describe key questions collaboratives need to face when presented at a crossroad moment and ways to evolve into a more resilient network. Check out the links at the episode webpage to learn about their excellent work, as well as a book that was published in 2022 as well. Every collaborative will face a time when they need to consider a path forward in a moment of significant change. It can be difficult for leaders to imagine a way forward, especially in situations such as the loss of a core leader, a primary funder, or facing a conflict without any preparation for dealing with disputes. What is essential to look at is the moment of change as an opportunity, to recognize it for what it offers, and to share how it impacts each partner and the overall collaborative. Learn the lessons the moment has to teach and to find a way forward. It reminds me of my early work as a mediator, where I learned that the Chinese character for conflict is crisis as opportunity. And I think this bodes well for collaboratives looking at their long-term future. In exploring what these pivotal moments offer, collaboratives need to consider questions including, how does our model need to shift in the short term and long term to have the impact we hope to make? How have we achieved what we set out to do? Is the network still needed? How do we shift our funding model and structure to become more sustainable in the long term? And how do we address conflict and make decisions? If networks have undertaken periodic phases of evaluation, iterated and adapted to the feedback gathered, including potentially revisiting their mission, vision, goals, and actions, they will be in a much better position to address these questions when substantial shifts occur. Moments of change can be a significant opportunity to reflect and to learn from struggle, as well as periods of success and planning for future needs of a group in a proactive manner rather than from a reactive stance. If a collaborative hasn't looked at these fundamental questions, significant moments of change may cause them to dissolve, cause greater conflict than the network can withstand, or can cause a significant loss of momentum and progress, and often great effort will be required to restart the progress. Learning from the struggle that networks will inevitably face is essential to developing the capacity to bounce forward into a more resilient future. If collaboratives don't take the time to reflect on periods of struggle or crises, or try to sweep challenging situations under the rug and not look at them at all, they will likely face similar situations again in the future. Conflict needs to be managed sensitively, carefully, as well as constructively and compassionately. The lessons learned during upheavals are the key to the future growth and resilience of the network, especially its capacity for transformation and potential for increased effectiveness. Sometimes collaborative leaders will be able to anticipate a change, such as the end of a grant period or the future retirement of a key leader. Other changes, such as a global pandemic, or an uprising such as what started in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, will require networks to examine some of their core assumptions and ways of operating and find new ways forward that adapt to changes in commonalities and culture. This might include a greater focus on building lasting equity, recentering those who aren't engaged with the network, making space for new leaders, shifting priorities, or pausing for a time for reflection and planned retreat before engaging in a new way. There are different movement and network life cycles. Tamira Shapiro with Movement Net Lab said in an excellent 2016 talk that the purpose of social movements are to find the periphery, bring it in, and then find a new periphery. One of the key elements of networks is to draw from the periphery into the center, whether that's with members, funding, ideas, or another edge. Periodically, collaboratives will need to examine where they are in this cycle and see if they're stagnating or need to pull in from the periphery again. Movement Net Lab also describes networks as being decentralized and self-organizing, with movements including experiments and collaborations, working from smaller acts to larger ones, learning through diversity, and developing successful innovations that spread. They're also clear that a network is different from an organization, a coalition, an email list, an online campaign, or a chapter organization. They talk about different structures are good for different things, like organizations are great at leadership development. Online organizations are good at reaching massive numbers. Chapter organizations are good at distributed power, and networks are good at innovating. Each have weak points as well. And Movement Net Labs notes that networks can struggle to create a unified strategy and way they want to work together. They also talk about the need to build healthy movement ecosystems to sustain a network. Networks often go through their own life cycle, which includes often a cultural or a community crisis with some kind of triggering event or a starting point. Then an upsurge where a network experiences a heroic phase. There's a lot of press about them, a peak or honeymoon phase, and then often a contraction, which could involve disillusionment. And finally, evolution and adaptation, which includes learning and reflection with best practices emerging, and then a new normal. It's often worthwhile for collaboratives to take time to build healthy network ecosystems, to share resources and communication infrastructure to be more effective over time, and to build with network participants and not start from scratch when significant challenges are faced. Tamira Shapiro, in the same talk mentioned above, describes how a collaborative is very much like a forest in its structure and function, and growing healthy soil with nutrients are key factors to focus on for long-term resilience and health. What grows a healthy network ecosystem? Networks need rich soil, nutrients with mycelium, connecting and communicating to sustain the network over time, including building capacity and bringing in new information, ideas, and people. Noting that it takes a long time to build deep relationships and trust, to move from incremental growth to exponential big leaps. Network participants need spaces to build their capacity, to find their people, connect and work together, to go out together and do things, and to feel part of a network. People work in different ways in networks, which helps build the soil of the network, including messengers, which are bees in our network moving around, as well as bridge builders and conveners. If people invest in one another doing different functions, the overall movement will be more effective. This is part of the work of building the soil and building the nutrients and the base of networks to grow new plants, trees, fruit, and compost in collaborative structures. Network successes come from structures that create change, which are the plants and trees in this forest analogy. But if networks just focus on action and policy development or just on implementing different goals, it can become a barren landscape, and it's harder for ideas to spread quickly and to create change without focusing on the soil or the social structures within networks. At the same time, with this forest analogy, learning from the struggle when things fail and die and turn into compost is essential, recognizing that the compost provides nutrients for the soil. This is how networks learn to iterate, adapt, and build deeper soil. So we're going to look at 4 different models for networks to consider for the long haul. In this episode, we've looked so far at what resilience is, overall network considerations, and life cycles. We're going to look more closely now at models or ways forward for collaboratives at crossroad moments, best practices for network functioning, and additional case studies. Building collective resilience looks different in different places. Resilience means growing a stronger, brighter future for generations to come. It also takes many shapes and comes in different sizes. Resilience includes building community, a healthier environment, and robust local economies. It also means growing equity, inclusion, and belonging, care of self and others, and creating regeneration at all levels. What stories and strategies inspire you? Share your ideas with us on social media and check out our website at yeswerise.org to find the show notes interview videos, and the links mentioned on the podcast today. Authors Shoemate and Cooper write in the same article mentioned above, a period of strategic retreat is not wasted on networks that can pivot. In this way, network leaders demonstrate the network is receptive to the needs of members and the community and is focused on the true value it has to offer. There's no way to fully insulate a network against a crisis, and indeed, no network serious about social impact should expect to achieve its goals without overcoming obstacles. But resilient networks navigate these moments confident they can continue serving their communities. The crossroad moment may leave them transformed, but they emerge more focused on their theory of change and values than before. While each network is different, so far we've identified 4 primary models for collaboratives to consider for their long-term future, which include, first, a significant shift in network structure, such as incorporating as a new nonprofit organization, becoming a project of a host organization or network partner, developing into an informal network at a reduced scale, becoming a for-profit venture, or potentially dissolving as the collaborative has achieved its mission and vision or otherwise approached a crossroad moment that no longer makes sense to continue as a network. The second model is to maintain the ongoing support of a backbone organization, which serves as the primary facilitator, coordinator, connector, and fiscal manager for the collaborative. This will often entail increasing in scale and developing a multi-pronged, diversified stream of funding support, especially if a single funder has primarily supported the collaborative in its early stages. Identifying diversified sources of funding that are aligned with the phases of implementation and building support for the backbone organization for long-term engagement is important, as well as identifying ways to bring in new people, ideas, and ways to implement goals and actions in the future, as well as lessons learned from challenges. And this is important for all the models. Third, a convener, member, or lead organization could be the primary facilitator, coordinator, connector, and fiscal manager for the network. Capacity building is essential for this model to help build skills across the needed roles for the collaborative. Different staff members may serve in these roles, and maintaining the focus and dedication to the overall collaborative can be difficult with this model rather than an independent facilitator and coordinator. Staff may get pulled into the lead organization's needs and mission rather than the mission of the overall network. Finally, fourth, a rotating self-leadership model where the roles of facilitator, coordinator, connector, and fiscal manager are shared and rotated between core entities or partners could also be considered. In the same way, capacity building is essential for this model to help build skill sets across needed roles for the collaborative. In considering their path over time and in designing their future, networks need to consider how they can bring value to its members and not just be a problem solver. It should be clear how it's connected to the overall vision and approach, with articulating clarity about the value the action will bring, the results it will yield, and how it can connect to new people or build new knowledge over time. Sharing lessons learned is key, even if there are setbacks or perceived failures. Finally, it's important to keep the energy up, build trust and connection, find new ways to have fun, and also celebrate successes and thank people as they inevitably need to move on. In the Network Weaver Handbook, author June Hawley writes that fostering network leadership to draw out the wisdom and experience of all network members, not just executive directors, is key. Hawley describes that a network weaver is someone who is aware of the networks around them and explicitly works to make them healthier. Hawley describes several roles within networks, including a connector catalyst, network guardian, project coordinator, and a network facilitator. The roles and tasks Hawley outlines include the connector, which maps out networks, welcomes new members, and connects them with existing members, as well as builds trust. The project coordinator, which includes forming or helping others form action groups, setting up coordination systems, and sharing back learning to the larger network. A network catalyst and facilitator, whose role includes convening people to organize an intentional network, helping to determine the network purpose and structure, setting agendas and facilitating meetings, and network guardians, which includes identifying what a network needs, establishing communication systems and platforms, setting up evaluation and reflection, and building capacity and training. Collaboratives often begin as a space to work collectively, and at our firm, Dialogue and Design, we believe the collective is more effective. Collective work can also be more difficult, messy, and take a long time, but the results of collaborative work are often far more effective and long-reaching than work at the individual scale. Knowing that change is inevitable and planning for it in advance is a core element of developing a resilient collaborative model. Knowing that funding structures will shift, decision makers and leaders will need to move on, and that programs, projects, and outreach will need to change with community or cultural changes is important, such as with the global pandemic or the racial reckoning that has been essential to increase efforts to build diversity, equity, inclusion, access, and belonging. Collaborative networks often bring a sense of shared purpose, momentum building, and energy that working in individual silos or as a lone partner doesn't offer. While it takes time to build relationships and trust, the resulting partnerships that have grown in collaborative work are often essential to sustain them through moments of change. A resilient network is one that can make it through a time of shift, change, or a stressor, and it can make it through a crossroads moment and continue working towards its mission in partnership, working towards a shared vision. A network can often come through transformed, bouncing forward, and can learn from difficulties or significant transitions to become stronger. To build resilient networks, there are several elements that need to be considered across 3 domains. First, governance and structure, including who's the network composed of? What are the decision-making processes? How do actions get implemented? How does the collaborative work? And what's the mission, values, and how do they shift? Second, culture and capacity building. How are ideas and resources shared? How are people engaged over time? And how are new ideas brought in? And third, funding, coordinating, and implementation, including evaluation, iteration, and overall processes for the network in the long term. At a more granular level, there's a core pattern or template that we use that guides our work with long-term, large geographic scale collaboratives, which includes several key elements. First, it involves identifying the change the collaborative is trying to make through creating a shared mission, vision, goals, and actions. This takes a lot of time and is through the work of many partners listening, and working together. Second, a planning team that guides the planning, logistics, and prioritizing ideas for meetings, events, and gatherings, and it usually meets every other week or once a month. A steering committee that makes decisions by consensus about the overall growth and direction of a collaborative, which meets monthly. Fourth, shared community agreements, values, or guidelines for the collective work. Fifth, larger meetings and gatherings that engage the wider network community, often meeting quarterly. Sixth, action teams, and this is where ideas are implemented through prioritized actions with network participants. This is where the rubber hits the road and actions are captured in an action planning worksheets for each team. These groups often function independently of the larger steering committee or collaborative meetings, and they track their ideas and focus on implementation. Action team leads often share their ideas, cross-pollinate ideas, and gather new ideas for collaboration and implementation, often at steering committee meetings. Seventh, an action plan is an external-facing document that captures the vision, mission, values, goals, and high-level actions for each action team. And a guiding document is an internal-facing document that shares information within a collaborative about how decisions are made, a description of different committees, communication information or style guides, and other documents such as financial procedures, an equity plan perhaps, or a communications plan, and other key internal-facing elements. Eighth, for evaluation and implementation, this is essential. There's a plan for annual evaluation and implementation of the result of the evaluation in an iterative process, and it might be connected to the theory of change the collaborative has developed. Tracking outcomes, data, and consistent evaluation, such as an annual evaluation or every other year, and adapting the focus of the collaborative to the evaluation results are key. And ninth, an open budget process that's shared, perhaps at steering committee meetings, with ongoing planning for developing a sustainable funding base is essential. Networks often develop a sense of norms or ways of working together that become familiar to participants, and they can lead to quicker communication and a shared sense of understanding that can make decision-making more effective with the group over time. There are several types of decision-making that groups use, and we often use consensus with groups. It can take longer for participants to fully consider and discuss a proposal that's on the table, but it often results in more robust decisions. At the same time, it's important to welcome new people to a collaborative space and take the time to really go over the decision-making process with them so they feel like they can be onboarded in a way that makes sense to them. So there are several key elements of consensus-based decision-making. We use a version of consensus that's somewhat similar to what some call consent-based decision-making, in that we welcome clarifying questions, and people often make modifications to the original proposal as needed with input from others before the group makes a decision. We use the following definition of consensus in our work with collaboratives with the decision-making body for a network, which is often the steering committee. So the definition we use for consensus-based decision-making is that all members of the steering committee will have equal status and voice in steering committee operation and decisions about the collaborative, which are made by consensus. This means that all members can live with and support a decision. A participant who consents will support all of the proposal and not just the parts they like best. While consensus may entail compromise, a participant who consents to a proposal does not compromise interests or core values of fundamental importance to themselves or their constituents. And the steering committee tests for consensus either by raising 3 fingers to indicate full support or via a verbal vote or chat roll, raising 2 fingers that indicate support with some questions or concerns, but still support, or 1 finger position by 1 or more people indicates a consensus has not been reached and more discussion is potentially needed. With this system, all members have an equal say and an equal voice about the decisions that affect them. Additional key elements of a resilient collaborative include ongoing capacity building where needed and desired to increase key skills, which could include training and facilitation, note-taking and agenda development, action planning, keeping the momentum up and tracking action items, training around consensus-based decision-making, dealing with difficult people or moments, planning for evaluation, and adaptation for long-term implementation. Second, meeting with consistency, tracking key action items, and following through when needed. Third, an updated funding strategy that includes ongoing diverse sources of funding from multiple funding streams and sources. Maintaining an overall action plan for the collaborative as well as tracking progress towards meeting the goals, actions, and short-term and long-term progress. It's often helpful to have a lead coordinator for an action plan, partners, and a time frame for implementation. Resources needed, and determining metrics for success or how do you know where you're finished is really helpful as well. Finally, it's helpful to revisit the action plan at regular time intervals, such as every year, 3 years, or 5 years to see what's been completed, what new ideas have arisen, or what there is no longer interest or energy for. Consistent communication to a broader group, such as through a monthly newsletter or an updated website and social media presence, is helpful. Active committees or action team chairs that work to implement the goals of the collaborative or network, set the agenda, keep broader members informed, and track strategies that are being implemented in meeting summaries or other documents is helpful, as well as keeping the door open to new stakeholders and being inclusive to all, including those who might not be traditionally engaged in an effort is key. Taking time to catch new members up and one-on-one conversations is needed, as well as sending previous meeting summaries and background documents to those folks. See episode 44 for more ideas about welcoming new people to a collaborative and maintaining ideas of momentum. It takes a long time to build connections, trust, and legitimacy with the group, and taking time to listen to people at the onset of an effort and on an ongoing basis, reaching out to people who would be helpful to be engaged in the effort proactively and to let them know about the effort is helpful. Acknowledge that conflict is a natural part of the network building process, and learning from struggle and even failure is a key element. Maintaining independent facilitators is another core element of networks as they can identify and address differences as they arise and help coordinate the network. Tracking progress over time is helpful to keep the momentum up, highlight accomplishments, and do outreach for key areas of progress, as well as see progress towards a theory of change if one has been articulated. And finally, having a network coordinator is often essential and at times a grants manager. So there's a lot that could be said about evaluating partnerships, but we're just going to look briefly at one method that we've adapted for our work in evaluating one of the projects that we support, the Middle and Upper James Riparian Consortium, which our firm Dialogue and Design facilitates. We drew from the partnership impact model developed by Amy Mickle and Lee Goldberg based on their work and impact of the One TAM partnership and findings from a 4-year partnership study, which you can read about in the show notes. The authors note that these different types of evaluating impact were very helpful in their partnership. A partnership in earlier phases of its life cycle may want to evaluate progress related first to foundational impacts, such as trust and connectivity, as well as operational impacts, which could be creativity, added capacity, resource sharing, and partner culture awareness. Partnerships that are farther along in their life cycle might consider focusing on outcome impacts related to efficiency, scale, and expanded connectivity, in addition to the foundational impacts of trust and connectivity. While partners are encouraged to evaluate multiple impacts during an evaluation cycle, they should also be mindful of the available resources and partner staff time. So there's a lot, again, that could be said about evaluation. It's essential, but it's really going to depend on where a network is and its growth and evolution and what their goals are. Now we're going to look a little bit at others, learning from others in some partnership case studies, and we're going to look at 3. The Delaware River Watershed Initiative, the Upper Susquehanna Coalition, and then the REAMP Network. When we first worked with partners to create the Middle and Upper James Riparian Consortium, we looked beyond our bioregion in Central Virginia and Western Virginia to see what others were doing as we explored the Delaware River Watershed Initiative and the Upper Susquehanna Coalition. These partnerships are both long-lasting examples of how networks have evolved over time, and links to learn more are included in the show notes. The Delaware River Watershed Initiative is a first-of-its-kind, multi-state collaborative of over 65 organizations working together to protect and restore the Delaware River and its tributaries. The Delaware River Watershed Initiative improves water quality and protects the drinking water for 15 million people in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. Launched by the William Penn Foundation in 2014, DRWI partners have protected more than 19,000 acres, restored over 8,000 acres, and monitored and sampled water quality at more than 500 sites across 4 states in its first 4 years. There are 5 key partners: the Academy of Natural Sciences at Drexel University, which drives research; the Institute for Conservation Leadership brings organizational expertise and facilitates. Large-scale funders include the Open Space Institute, that has the $9 million Delaware Watershed Fund, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, which has awarded more than $7 million, and the William Penn Foundation invests $30 million per year in watershed-wide research and advocacy. DRWI has identified 8 priority areas where restoration and protection projects can have a lasting impact. Each region has a description of, first, regional descriptions and threats; second, reasons why the work is important to that area; third, approach with accomplishments and projected outcomes; fourth, monitoring and measurement explanation; sixth, relevant funding and mix of partners; and last, events listed by area within the region. The website for the effort is 4statesonesource.org, and you can see that in the show notes. The second partnership case study we explored is the Upper Susquehanna Coalition, which is a network of 17 soil and water conservation districts in New York and 4 conservation districts in Pennsylvania. Their mission is to protect and improve water quality and natural resources in the Upper Susquehanna River Basin with the involvement of citizens and agencies through education, partnerships, planning, implementation, and advocacy for our water resources. The USC was established in 1992 to work on non-point source water quality issues in the headwaters of the Chesapeake Bay. In 2006, it transitioned to a pure conservation district coalition using a memorandum of understanding based on New York and Pennsylvania state laws that allows districts to enter into multi-district agreements. The Tioga County Soil and Water Conservation District is designated in the MOU as the USC administrator responsible for all contractual and other legal obligations. Based on this approach, the USC has developed 3 focus areas and several teams to work towards this mission. Focus areas include environmentally and economically sustainable agriculture, stream corridor restoration, and wetland restoration. The website is uppersusquehanna.org/USC. The third case study we'll explore is the REAMP network, and this is from the REAMP website. Due to their heavy reliance on coal, the states of the upper Midwest have contributed vastly disproportionate amounts of carbon to the atmosphere, resulting in climate change impacts and comprising the health and well-being of our communities. At the same time, the political opportunity here is promising. Midwestern politics have outsized impacts on national politics, so Midwestern leadership can help drive U.S. action on climate change. Taken together, this set of circumstances makes the Midwest a linchpin for national progress towards a sustainable and just clean energy future. Motivated by this unique opportunity for impact, a growing number of organizations have been working together as the REAMP network and boldly tackling Midwest climate change for over a decade. Since its beginning, the network has been defined by its ambitious focus and its innovative and adaptive approach to whole systems change. Through ongoing systems analysis, network members develop a keen understanding of Midwest energy system and identify what changes would do most to reduce our carbon emissions. Then they collaborate to align their strategies across 8 states in a service of a shared North Star goal to equitably eliminate greenhouse gas emissions in the Midwest by 2050. Today, the network has grown to over 130 nonprofit and foundations with distinct strengths and array of approaches. While some focus on policy advocacy, others work in frontline communities or focus on building the political will necessary for climate action. Member organizations include the Great Plains Institute, Joyce Foundation, Ohio Citizen Action, Little Village Environmental Justice Organization, and several others. Many bring a diversity of perspectives that not only position the network to build a broader and more effective climate movement in the Midwest, but to also amplify network members' collective power and ability to achieve results. Game-changing policy victories have taken place. Through the Global Warming Strategic Action Fund, the network has re-granted over $25 million to support strategic climate action in the Midwest. With a proven model for success, the network is accelerating the transition off of fossil fuels in the Midwest and helping to establish the region as an influential swing state in national and international decision-making. Now, here's what's interesting, their guiding principles. Although REAMP set their direction according to their North Star goal of equitably eliminating greenhouse gas emissions in the Midwest by 2050, sometimes they say things can get a little cloudy and they need guideposts close to where they stand now. To help them evaluate if they're headed in the right direction, members work together to create guiding principles. They use these to determine how they analyze a potential solution. First, they center equity, inclusivity, justice, and healing. Second, they prioritize local ownership of processes and outcomes. Third, they leverage systemic change. Fourth, they establish holistic, ambitious, and credible intermediate steps. Fifth, they promote regeneration through responses to climate change. To learn more, see the website reamp.org. In closing, in the Network Weaver Handbook, June Hawley writes, "Systems change when new networks supplant the old. Underneath every system is a set of networks. First, there is a network holding the ways in place that need to be exposed to the world and opened up for change. In addition, there is a network, often much larger than we realize, of unconnected or loosely connected individuals who want a healthier system. One of the most effective ways to change a complex system is by connecting these individuals and helping them take action to change the system. The creation of networks that include marginalized individuals and groups in their core is, in fact, a key element of healthy transformed systems. One thing we know about transforming systems is that the process requires tremendous amounts of innovation and experimentation. This will be most useful when the results of hundreds or thousands of experiments are shared widely, and all the contraindications and tensions that arise are embraced and used to shake us out of the limiting assumptions we've been making. Here's to our collective work, visioning, learning, and action to build resilient networks and collaboratives. We welcome your ideas, innovations, and feedback. A special thank you to two incredible dialogue and design team members, Emily Carlson and Philippa Belches, for their thought partnership and collaboration in our work together. I'm grateful to both of you and to the networks and amazing groups we get to work with. And to each of you, thank you for the shared work that all of you do to build a brighter future. Take care. Hello, solution seekers and change makers. We are glad and grateful for the work you are doing in the world. To learn more about the stories and speakers featured in this episode, check out our website at yeswerise.org. You'll find the show notes, interview videos, and the links mentioned today, and you can join our email list. Subscribe to the show to catch every new episode wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave us a rating and review. It so helps others find the podcast too. You can also check us out on Facebook or Instagram at Yes We Rise to share your ideas. Enjoy!